I remember my first introduction to DevOps was a Microsoft. Welcome, everyone, to the DevOps Roundup. This is the relaunch of the channel. We are trying again in 2025. Shawn Doyle here, Alex Ortiz, the new co-host. Welcome, Shawn.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. That was a great introduction. It's a good start for the relaunch. So it's been a number of months, and we're starting again, and we're going to set a pace for these episodes.
Yeah, because consistency is key.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what that pace becomes. Our initial expectations is weekly, but depending on what we have to say and what news is in the industry, we may be less frequent. Unlikely more frequent, but possible.
Well, I got a reputation to maintain, right? So we got to make sure we do at least weekly.
Yeah.
But Shawn, yes. Why don't you tell our audience here, what are we trying to achieve here with the DevOps Roundup?
So the DevOps Roundup, we started it to basically be a place that people could come to learn about what DevOps is, what vendors are supporting DevOps in the industry, and what are the benefits of DevOps, and how do you go about solving certain problems in DevOps? What are the vendors doing? Is it helping? Is it not helping? And basically, what the general direction of DevOps is, and it's had many different directions in the last almost 15 years that DevOps has been a thing.
It's been around for a while. I remember my first introduction to DevOps was a Microsoft term. I was working out of the Team Foundation server tools, and DevOps was this new idea. It was this new concept where instead of having a developer create code and a support engineer manage the code after it's been tossed over the fence, the operations part of it, the maintainability, the everything that happens after you hit that commit button on your code, that onus went back to that developer. And so the developer did the development and the ops, hence the DevOps. And that was a new concept that it got introduced to me fairly early in my career.
Yeah. And when was that? It was 2000,
circa 2013,
2013,
2012,
okay.
2013.
I guess like 2012 or something like that. Yeah, because that's about the time I remember hearing Microsoft, throwing their hat in the ring. So I started a little earlier than that, and we were doing things called process automation before DevOps became a thing, and you're right on where one of the key initial aspects of DevOps is tearing the silo down between an operation department and a development department. And that is still a key aspect of DevOps, but it had grown since around the 2012 to probably 2014, 2015 timeframe to include all software development tools and all tools that you would typically use in an operation environment. So your observability, logging, things like that, alerting, all those type of tools, to also include setting up the platform that you're deploying to, and then whole platform engineering came out of all that as well.
Yeah, because it evolved fairly quickly for me. In 2013, 2013, when I was jumping into Team Foundation server, really it was more of like uniting the development aspect of it and the test case management, right? So you had some sort of a unit test, some sort of a automated test, some sort of just testing in general that would happen after your code deliveries, and that for us was a win, right? Just having the ability to do your testing immediately after your code was committed was a huge win. We weren't talking automated deployments yet. We weren't really talking anything with builds per se, although builds started creeping up as I went from 2013 to 2014, where having automated builds and just not doing your code on your machine.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the before all of that, right? The famous tagline of like "it works on my machine"
Yeah.
was very true, right?
You still hear that from time to time, or another one that I always cringe when I hear it is, oh, the whatever tool server died. Oh, where was it? Oh, under my desk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I grew up with a lot of that in my career. But as I fast forward to 2015 into 2016, that was my first introduction into Jenkins.
Mhm.
And that was the first time where we were doing nightly builds. So a lot of developers were contributing code and they would do their integration build
Mhm.
with Jenkins. And then eventually throughout the whole day, all of the commits from all the different engineers would compile a nightly build.
Yeah.
And it
And you,
would run a series of tasks and automations and whatnot.
you come in the morning and everyone's blaming somebody for breaking
Right.
the nightly build. Yes.
But that was a quick transition, right? That was a quick, like from 2013 to 2016, or just in that 2 to 3 year span,
Mhm.
it evolved quickly, right? Because by the time I went into Jenkins, it felt way more mature, right? It wasn't just testing, but it was doing a lot of verification. Unit tests were starting to kind of roll out.
Mhm.
Um, and then we would also, what was new to me at that point was the software package, the image we would actually put on the disk was generated through a weekly build that we would punch
Mhm.
out at the end of the week.
Yeah.
So those were new endeavors for me, and that was fun because learning how to tag branches in your Git repository and align things with your CI/CD and different libraries and different parts of the repos had different builds, and so that to me was just an overwhelming experience at the
Yeah,
beginning.
or orchestrating all of that and using Jenkins for the first time was always fun. Yeah, I started doing build automation. That's kind of where this all came from, um, with Perl scripts back in the the early '90s. And Perl scripts, there was actually a number of things that came out roughly the same time as Jenkins, and they you know can't remember all of them. I know one was Build Forge that I supported for quite a few years in the early days, I'm starting. Obviously, I've dated myself a number of times already, but and basically automating all the things, and you try to get it so you can go from complete from prior to code commit all the way to delivery to whatever you're delivering to. Another big change, which I think helped bring in DevOps, was the fact that most people are deploying to some sort of internet-facing system, which eventually became clouds.
Yeah, and
And
we haven't even gotten that far yet at
yeah,
this point.
because you mentioned disk, so you were delivering something to some media that was then installed somewhere else, and most likely had some sort of install wrapper built around it, whether
Correct.
it was a commercial one or a homegrown one. I think I've done more homegrown install scripts than I have commercial ones.
Yeah, the dot slash and then the file name
Yeah.
was a common thing that I just there's so, there's something to say about auto tab complete in Linux and Unix that just you get that gratification every time.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Um,
I, I always have to install that on my Windows machines too. But
Linux for the win. Yeah, so then as I fast forwarded to end of 2016 into 2017, that then evolved into Jira as the project management tool
Mhm.
with TeamCity being my CI/CD tool. But things got more interesting there because there we now had like Baracode
Mhm.
and for code analysis, we had static code analysis. So we had we had the Baracode for vulnerabilities and whatnot. Then we had a static code analysis. We had stuff for code smells, checking best practices and standardizations of like
Sure.
your Java, C++,
Yeah.
trying to
Different
see.
linters. Yeah.
Yeah, so that started gradually again evolving more and more, where you weren't just building and checking to make sure that your code wasn't breaking that nightly build, but rather now you're checking against industry best practices, known
Corporate
vulnerabilities, yeah, quality standards, getting a score, right? It's getting some sort of a rating on did you mess things up or not, and also an introduction to the peer review process for me that started coming in 2016, 2017, where as part of the commit message, as part of your pull request, which
standard.
was now a new thing for me as well, that PR would then trigger a nightly that integration build, and it would trigger a peer review process that you then had to tag a couple of friends or leads to go look at your code.
Yeah, much better having that integrated into the whole system. Than
Yeah,
prior
and
to
this,
that, it was more of an honor system. Did you do a code review or a peer review? And depending on the group the development group that you're in, the honor system was either complete, well, we expect you to do this, hope you did it, to it was almost like a change control board type thing, which I'm sure you've had to sit through some of those type of organizations that have change control boards. Uh,
yeah.
and you basically have to have 2 or 3 of your peers bless your code before it could get committed. Um,
Yeah, and then my last hurrah into the DevOps world, and at towards the tail end of 2017, early 2018, was taking VMware. At the time, had VMware Horizon and a couple of other like on-demand cloud creations, and so leveraging Team City, so that when your build was complete, it would then basically, this is pre-Docker, right? But it
mhm.
would basically create a pure environment and push your libraries, push your dependencies, push your code into this purebred templatized environment that can then run your code. And so that was like one of the last things that I ended up doing before I dedicated myself to just be a Jira administrator and project manager.
Yeah, which is right there in your name tag.
Dr. Jira.
So I'm sure people picked up on that, and
I'll
most.
tell you, I used to love DevOps. One day, so my team that I worked with, we were in charge of basically software development tools.
Okay.
Thus, Jira being the project management part of it, Team City and all of our build tools being the other half of the story, right?
Mhm.
And one day, our hard drive got corrupted. It filled up. The
Okay.
storage filled up. We somehow ignored all the warnings that says you're 99.999%
Happens.
filled up in your storage, and it started overwriting on itself to the point where the whole drive got corrupted. And
So
so
what tool was overriding? It wasn't Jira.
we used to have a tool, Solaris,
Solaris,
SolarWinds, something.
Solaris is an operating system.
Yes, SolarWinds, something that would monitor the health and status of a server. I
Okay.
forget
So
that DevOps.
SolarWinds is one. I'm not sure if it dates that far back. I don't remember
Well, this
when.
was in 2017, 2018.
Oh,
SolarWinds was,
SolarWinds was
yeah,
available then.
yeah, yeah. So we had something that kind of checked the health and status of the server, and we were in the middle of setting that up.
Yeah.
But long story short, it got corrupted, servers went down, and all the documentation to bring everything back on was on set server.
Mm.
And that was kind of the moment of like, you know what? I'm kind of done with IT.
So it wasn't that this ruined you for DevOps. This is I want to get out of doing
IT.
the
Yeah.
IT stuff.
That's why I
Well,
don't touch Jira Data Center. That's why I don't touch Confluence Data Center.
that's actually where I was going to go with this. Where a lot of the vendors, it's not only Atlassian, but Atlassian is the big leader in pushing all the software development tools to the cloud. Um, and that just changes the skill sets that a DevOps consultant needs, because you're not interfacing directly with databases much anymore. You're not having to stand up servers or worry about disk space or failovers, disaster recovery. That most of that's handled by the vendor, especially in Atlassian's case. But the other vendors are following as well, and it's becoming a different, like I said, a different skill set that you have to have. You have to
And
be more customer
how do you
facing.
feel about that though? Given that you've been in this industry for as long as you have, are you bittersweet? Are you happy? Are you excited? Because I'm happy. I'm ecstatic, right? The fact that I don't have to log into Linux at all or look at a command prompt or a
So
terminal, I'm
yeah,
beyond.
I don't know if I'm bittersweet about it, because I'm neither bitter nor ever sweet. So um, I equate it to the muscle car era and the muscle car era ending, which is before your time, but you used to be able to take a car apart with like a small set of hand tools, and if your car broke down, there's 2 or 3 things that you would have to take care of. Quick trip to the parts store, you're done, your car's back up and running. um, and then within a decade, cars became so complicated that only special mechanics could work on them. And right now you have to go out and get all these different certificates that I don't know what the hell they are, to be certified to work on cars, and then it's different for each major brand.
Yeah, at
I
this
kind
point,
of
all you
see it.
can do is really is like change an oil, like change your oil, and that's it.
Yeah, that's pretty
Don't
much
change your
it.
tires, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and not if you have a Tesla, right? Yeah.
Right. That's why I said
But
maybe. I'm like, I don't think I can rotate my own Tesla tires.
yeah, I have not even tried. So disclaimer: we both own Teslas, but don't look
Don't come
down
at
on me
us.
for that. Um,
I was gonna
I'm
say
not-
this was before Elon went crazy.
yes, and I also have many other cars that are not Teslas that actually are from the muscle
I was
car
gonna say, you
era.
have cars. You have cars in your collection that you. I remember being a little kid, jumping out of the car, pushing the car, so that my uncle can like pump something with the clutch and like make it start.
Start it, yeah, because you probably had a problem with the starter and the manual transmission. You don't need to use the starter. It has to be thrown in gear when someone's pushing it
My uncle had a
or going down a hill.
85 or 86 Pontiac Trans Am.
Okay.
So I grew up with that.
Yeah.
Never worked. It always just sat in the driveway because it could never turn it on. But
Did it
it
have
was
the big eagle on the front?
yeah,
Yeah. So the Burt Reynolds car. Yeah.
yeah. Fun little fact. I have to show this one to you. Hold up. One of the programs that I worked on. This was the logo that they got. I'm like, that looks strangely familiar.
Yes. Yeah, definitely looks like the
I'm like, well, we're not gonna sell it, right? We won't get into copyright problems.
well, that's two-headed, and the one on the Trans Am was just a one-headed. So,
Yeah,
flaming
you got to
chicken.
make it a little bit different to
Yeah.
get away with it. But that was one of my favorite. That's one of the things I do miss about like good old government days is the code words of programs and stuff like that. They
Yeah.
always meant something cool.
Yeah. Well, even before, well, I've always been doing government programs on and off, but I had a number of telecom companies that I worked for in the 90s, and they were big on code names for the projects. So the product was always had an internal name, and I think most software companies really do this. And they name the next release some sort of internal name, so nobody outside the company knows what it is. And then when it goes general availability, they rename it to the Apple 10 or whatever. But
Yeah,
before that, it was I don't know what Apple uses for their code names, but um, we had a hockey fan in one of the companies that I worked for in the early 90s. And so everything was a hockey term. And I know almost nothing about hockey, but I know what a hat trick is now. I know what a slap shot is. Those were 2 big projects that I worked on back in the day.
yeah. And so a lot happened then between 2018 and I would say 2020. Because by the time I came back onto the developer scene, I
Mhm.
went straight project management. Feature flags was a thing.
Yeah, feature flags started leaking in probably the early 2000s, but it means different things as you go along. But basically, it started out as a way to toggle code on and off. That if you had code that was dependent on other subsystems that weren't ready yet, feature flags allowed you to produce the code when you were ready, and just have the flag be not set. And then when the other teams were finally ready to develop whatever interfaced with your code, then someone on the operations side of things could flip the bit, and all of a sudden that
Yeah.
code is now live.
But that
Um,
changed developer behavior a lot, right? Because prior
for
to
the
that,
teams that actually used it, I still
yeah.
have teams that are investigating the use of feature flags.
Well, it changed behavior though because before your code had to work.
Yes, yeah, yeah. You could
Now,
not check in bad code. Yeah,
right, and now you just put it behind a feature flag.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can hide bad or unfinished code behind feature flags, but the thought is it's not incomplete, but it's not ready for prime time, or the example I used was, if we're both on two separate teams and we both have an API that has to talk to each other, and I have the cycles to rev my API to the next level, but your team doesn't. I can hide it behind a feature flag, or have multiple values for my feature flag to
Yeah,
say, okay, my API is backwards compatible, but the latest one isn't. So I have
yeah,
the system has the feature flag. But the next thing with the feature flags that happened is, the feature flags can be controlled by a outside resource, and there's a number of software vendors that host a cloud instance for their feature flags. And so your product, whatever you create, then calls out to this other company saying, hey, what are my feature flags and what do I do, for the different settings. um, and
and
that
as we
was a
start
big change.
coming into 2025, I think the game has evolved drastically, right? Like there's so many vendors, so many different solutions out there,
Yeah.
right? So many different apps, products, so many different techniques. It used to be, I think, simpler. I think it used to be
Oh,
more, I would say more basic. It used to be more basic.
it has, but it's gone through cycles. There's been times where we had an explosion of vendors, and then a whole bunch of M&A happens, and we get down to like the big three. Like in the early 2000s, it was pretty much IBM, CA, and HP were the three big software development tool vendors, and everybody else were just so small compared to those three. And then I think I credit Atlassian for knocking all three of those down. But it was also the economy at the time. And then we went into a time where there was just, dozens and dozens of software vendors to choose from, and almost an unlimited combination. Um, and in certain ways, we're kind of going back to, we're not there yet, but we're kind of going back towards the, kind of having a big three. And right now that looks like GitHub, GitLab, and Atlassian. So
Yeah, no, definitely.
yeah,
And
there's
and I
other big mentions in there as well, but those are kind of the big three. Yeah.
yeah, and I still remember the very first time I heard of GitHub. I was in college. This would have been around 2011. Yeah, right around 2011, either late 2010 or early 2011. There was a guy that came over and he's like, I'm gonna show you guys this thing. Because prior to GitHub, we used to email each other our code. And we had version one, version
Dangerous way to start a conversation. Sometimes I want to show you this thing.
I'll show you this thing. He was like, I'm gonna revolutionize your world. And we used to, again, we used to email code, right? We'd have version 1, version 1.1, version 1.2, version 1.2 final, version this is really gonna work now final. And
Yeah,
we didn't have any good version control. And I think this is a part that we kind of missed of DevOps too, right? Which was Git, and GitHub and all that stuff. Subversion. It used to be an adult thing, I would call it, right? It was something that you did in the company, in your enterprise, but
Mhm.
Git really came in, really disrupted stuff.
Yeah, it did.
And
Yeah.
I think once Git came in, right because before Git we had what, Subversion, Mercurial,
Yeah,
Tor.
Mercurial was a short-lived little thing. It's still out there in the wild, but hardly ever seen. More like, like a Sasquatch or something. Um, but no, there's a an army of tools that came before Git, and Git just overwhelmingly replaced them. But it's funny you mentioned GitHub in college, and I'm pretty sure that's where most people ran in to GitHub, that that are 40 or under. But one of the tools that, in fact, we've been talking for a while, and I haven't mentioned ClearCase yet.
I was hoping we'd go the whole episode, but
Yeah,
here we are.
so sorry, we're
back
gonna talk ClearCase a little bit. The two main reasons ClearCase became like the dominant tool in the 90s, and continued throughout the early 2000s, what was because it adopted a college go to market, where they basically just cities, and so it was free for them. It was a pain in the ass to set up, but at that time, that you're giving it to people that want to play with things, and so they were figuring it out. They're figuring out Unix back then because it was pre-Linux, and it lasted for a long time. But before that, we had SCCS and RCS. Those were like the two main initial version control systems. And RCS is still out there. SCCS really isn't. It lasted for a while because it was part of the most Unix distributions, or
Microsoft at the time. Microsoft had their own too, right? Visual Source Safe or something like that.
Yeah, it came out a little bit later. But Visual Source Safe was a derivative of RCS, I believe.
Which then eventually became TFS. Kind of had their own thing, and then eventually became Git.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about where do you stand in the whole trunk-based development versus like Git flow?
I'm more of a trunk-based developer guy, but Git flow has its places. And the majority of my opinions about everything is there's always a gray area, and it's never black and white. And I live in that gray area. There's so Git flow is, there's multiple places where it got its origins from, and one of them is a typical use of ClearCase. But it's much more organized, or it's much more organized is a good enough word for that way to do software development. If you have to be very nitpicky about where a change is introduced and follow that change from concept to delivery, then Git flow is the better method. If that is not a requirement for how you do software development, trunk-based delivery or trunk-based design is a much more efficient way. So it depends. Is efficiency more important than accuracy? And maybe accuracy is too mean of a word to put there. But if you have to have tight controls over how things get delivered, and if you're so if you go back to like a military contract, and I have to support 10 different variations of airplanes, and I can only I can only deliver software for X number of versions, but not these other ones, then I don't want to be on trunk based. I want to be on something like a Git flow.
Yeah, because that's back in 2017. I remember being in a room with like 10 engineers, and we were looking at the Git flow model, and all 10 of us had a different interpretation of how to read that dumb diagram. and I think that this is why I want to transition into the future of the podcast here as we start rounding out the second half and start wrapping it up here. One of the things that I want to achieve with the podcast here is to kind of just discuss DevOps in general, right? Because just the way you have your opinions with Git flow, and I had my 10 people that had 10 different views on it, everything in the DevOps space is beauty in the eye of the beholder. And I don't know that there's a silver bullet for any of these tools. There's no silver bullet for which tool to use, which process to use, which vendor's better, right? Which solution's better.
Which combination? Yeah.
Yeah, which combination they're for. So I think one of my goals with the podcast is to one, get educated, right? Education by learning, preparing for this podcast, force ourselves to kind of look at what's in the market today, what's Microsoft doing, what's Amazon doing, Google, right? Top vendors, what's going on there. But at the same time, also kind of we want to compare and contrast that with our histories, right? Where it's been, is it better? Is it worse? Kind of give you all the as the audience the perspectives of just our opinions on this is cool, or because I'm a developer, I'm sure you've written code too, Shawn, right? And
Yeah.
so
Terrible code, but
yeah,
I've written code.
nonetheless. But the point is, like, we can give a perspective of our history compared to where the industry is going, and then I think we're going to talk a lot about AI at some point in future episodes too.
I think we have to.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it's taken about 30 minutes before it really came up in this episode, because I think there's way too much buzz around AI, and we can save my skepticism on
AI.
AI
I was
for future.
so in preparation for this episode, I was looking at an article on DevOps.com and
Mhm.
or sorry, on the register, and it was talking about how large language models can't stop making up software dependencies and sabotaging everything. And basically it's just making like and I see this with Jira. Yesterday I was trying to do a Confluence database thing.
Okay.
And I told it, I'm like, hey, AI, help me. I'm trying to do something in Confluence databases, which is Atlassian needs to put in a little bit more love into this product.
True.
And
Yeah.
and then with so much confidence, ChatGPT is like, just do this, this, and this, and you're gonna get the result you want.
And
I'm like, cool story, bro. Except Confluence databases can't do that.
yeah.
And so I think it opens up opportunities where we're gonna want to be reviewing and discussing hallucinations with AI and what it means for the future software development, what it means for the future of DevOps. Because I also had an interview with Susie Prince, one of the senior vice presidents at or the head of DevOps at Atlassian, and I asked her, where do you see Atlassian's role in the DevOps space, right? And her answer was very interesting to me. She basically told me that like they want to augment humans, right? They want humans to still be in control,
Okay.
but they want the nuances of DevOps to kind of be automated through the use of AI. But even though you can, because my biggest concern to her was, I told her, well, with the advent of DevOps, and it's something you described when we are still in the green room, if you will, which was DevOps to you, man, getting code out there faster, right? Like getting shipping things faster at faster cadences. And I worry that with AI, we're going to be able to ship code at a cadence that's exponentially faster than anybody's ever seen before, because you're going to be able to go through your entire pipeline, through your reviews, audits, and everything so much infinitely quicker. But is the world ready for that? Like, is the world ready for your, like, my Tesla?
No, I don't. I definitely don't. I think the answer to that is no.
No.
But
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the other things that I wanted to mention in the podcast, and yeah, I definitely want to touch back on that, because I do want to kind of outline what my view of DevOps is, because there is different views on what DevOps is, and I don't think there's one right answer. But once you identify, hey, this is my definition of DevOps, then we can continue on and have a conversation. And we don't have to have the same definition as long as we understand what each other's definition is. And my primary one is anything that helps improve getting software out faster at a higher quality and a higher security. That to me is DevOps, and that includes anything that helps you in that. So to me, DevOps is this giant umbrella, and things like agile and safe platform engineering, all that stuff are tools in our toolbox so that we can do DevOps. And so that's my view of DevOps. And so I get into conversations with people that ask me, is DevOps dead because we now have platform engineering? And like, no, it isn't. Platform engineering is a great way to attack things for certain organizations, but it's still a tool in your toolbox. And I'm a huge tool collector, so I don't only collect ducks. Um, I have a giant barn with lots of tools that I probably will never touch, but I have everything in my toolbox. So if a problem comes up, I have a tool for it, and I think DevOps is the same way. But I think as we do this podcast and we start going to different events that are DevOps oriented, there's going to be some really interesting conversations that come up. And especially when you hear from folks like there's a guy from Disney, Jason Cox. He's like the head of IT for all of Disney. And he lives not too far from you, most likely. So I know he goes into Burbank a lot, so he's probably
Okay.
45 minutes away from you or something. But he talks every year at this one conference, and his session is the session to go to. Not only is he get into the weeds of how he's deployed DevOps practices across aspects of Disney. And I don't want this to get into a Disney commercial, but
Stay tuned because we're also launching a Disney podcast.
well, one podcast at a time, but yeah,
one at a time. But we'll get there.
Yeah, he will typically give us he'll drop he'll leak something for you. So it's usually a clip that hasn't been sent out yet or something like that. So I'm sure he's got authority to do that. But
yeah, and that's what I'm really excited for, right? Like just getting different people's perspectives, case studies, interviews with vendors, interviewing with customers, just understanding what's going on in the DevOps ecosystem because it's just so big, so broad.
Yeah,
it's enormous, and I don't think there's so much room here for a lot of us to go in a lot of different ways. And in that comment section down below, if there's any style, technique, specific topics that you care for, just let us know down there in that comment section so we can look at. But I think, Shawn, one of the big areas that we can come in and add some value, I think, would be like versus videos, right? That whole platform versus DevOps, GitHub versus GitLab, and even within features, right? How does GitHub do this versus how does GitLab do this?
Mm-hmm.
Is there one way that's better, right? And so there's a lot of opportunities for us to debate, for us to review, analyze, discuss, dissect, and just kind of see what's going on and give fresh perspectives, or at least two perspectives.
Yeah. One major disclaimer I want to say right after that, because I completely agree. I think those would be really fun episodes to do. I do partner with the vast majority of software vendors in the DevOps space, and I don't like to play favorites. I obviously you have to have favorites, but I don't necessarily like to play favorites, and I try to be as agnostic as possible and as fair as possible. We're not sponsored by any of them right now. I don't know how we want to do that. If
I think, I don't. So it doesn't have to necessarily be like a debate then for that, but it'd be interesting to say, like,
I'd love to do bake-offs.
Yeah,
and given that we're trying to keep this under an hour, the bake-offs would probably have to be on a feature by feature. Like GitHub Actions does something this way. How do you do the same thing with
again, it's like more of a comparison and contrast, but not a this is better than that, but it's just like you're trying to achieve X. Here's how these 2 or 3 different vendors do it.
But I think I don't think you're wrong. I think we will find it's better doing it X than doing it Y.
Yeah.
Except for in this situation.
And then there's discussions of like, are GitHub Actions worth it, right? Like, should you pay for them? Like, is it how many should your company consider grabbing, right? And are you overusing it if you're hitting these kind of usage limits or whatever, right? So I think it'd be interesting to just, again, it's too early to tell, way too early, but definitely expect opinions from the both of us.
Yeah, we have plenty of those. Yeah,
as we try not to get into too much trouble with future sponsors.
Yes.
And future partners of ours.
We will try to
this is why when I stick with Jira, it's easy because it's just Atlassian. But I do get myself into interesting
I've seen you
situations
get
with
yourself in trouble. Yeah.
with the marketplace vendors. Like
Oh yeah.
I even at Team 25, I don't know if I told you, I had to go put out a couple fires.
You did mention that. I don't remember the specifics, but yeah. Oh, and even on your your Jura Life podcast, you guys have said the wrong sponsor a couple of times, or forgot to mention the sponsor entire
You know
episode.
what? If you're going to be sponsoring this podcast, please change. We're going to just make sure that our sponsors have start with different letters, because the dyslexia in me reads all the letters the same. There's this thing where like you need the first and the last letter of any word, and your brain puts in the rest of the
Yes.
letters. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Or
So
if
when I
the words of a sentence are out of order, your mind reads it in order.
yeah, so that's I have too many sponsors that start with the letter R.
You do. Yeah. And they all basically do the same function.
Yeah. I've gotten burned before. And then I think one of the things, right? So I have a book on DevOps that we might want to dissect and take a look at as well. You got a book on DevOps that you might want to dissect and discuss
Yeah.
as well. There's potential for us to co-author a book at some
We
point.
have
That
thoughts of co-authoring a book. We have material that needs to be revisited and can be turned into a
yeah.
book.
And then one of the things I know I've discussed with you, but I don't know the plan of attack, but whether it's on this particular podcast itself or through the ApeTech brand that I have, a how to use the DevOps tools is coming. Right, that's something more for my personal learning that I really want to focus on is how to use Docker containers. Right, I told you that I want to compete with Tech with Nana.
Oh yeah. Well, and where we want to start? Do we want to go back to Vagrant and work our way up to Docker, and then continue on, up to Kubernetes and things
I
like
I
that?
I
Or
think I think we do what's trending. I think if we want to grow the channel, we got to do what's trending, right? But I think how tos is going to be something of value that we can provide. And then the other thing, boy, that I just had at the tip. Oh, certifications, right? There's so many certifications
yeah.
within this ecosystem. I know that on the Jira side, I do a lot of study sessions of the certifications. So I don't think that would be what in the realm of not possible where you
Well,
and I sit
definitely
down.
we can dive in on that because certifications across the vendors are not equal. Some of them have a lot more weight for your career, and some of them have almost no weight.
Yeah.
And some of them you have to get if you're going to be working for a consulting company, because usually these vendors hold the consulting or partners more hostage to get certificates to rise up their partner channel. Typically, they have tiers, and it's all depending. It depends on a lot of things, but
Mm.
usually, number of certifications is a very a high uh,
And
criteria.
and complementing that, you said partner, right? So there's partner tiers. Microsoft, I'm sure, has their build conferences coming up, and I'm sure their partners come over, right?
Yeah.
And so conferences you mentioned already. So we want to go to conferences, interview folks, talk about what's going on at conferences. Certifications, we want to talk about certifications, but also community, right? Like what are different communities doing out there? What's going on from like a developer advocate perspective, tech evangelist perspective, even solution architecture type of perspectives of like, I think there's a lot of opportunities from a content creation, community based type of events like meetups and stuff like that we can also leverage as
Yeah,
well.
if anyone has a meetup, throw it in the comments, and
The only requirement that we have is what is it? Beer and cookies, right?
I would settle for cookies, but I
Just the
prefer I
cookies.
like the beer too. Yeah.
You must have cookies at your event if you want us to show up. But anyway, so Shawn, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I think again, the beginning of hopefully many episodes. And I hope we can bring some value, right? I think sticking to the basics is going to be cool, but being able to provide with that 20 plus years history that you got in the space, my last 10 years, and just tapping into personal stories and tapping into best practices and analysis, right? I think it's going to bring some value to the viewers here.
Like so first 35 Well, so 35 years, so the first probably 15 of those is going to be very heavy clear case. There's going to be a lot of clear case stories and
You do cookies, and then I'll have to do doors.
doors. Oh, unfortunately, I've got a lot of doors as well. It's older than clear case.
I came in when I came into the space. Uh, I caught the tail end of everything there. I caught the tail end of doors. I caught the tail end of clear
Oh,
case and clear quest.
doors is still going strong.
No, I know, but
Unfortunately, I'm not a huge doors fan, but I have been a doors admin on and off.
there was always like a next gen doors that I had heard rumors of coming out.
Oh, yeah, it came out in 2004 or 2005, and
Okay,
they're still pushing it as the next gen
next gen.
doors. But, it's 20 years old now.
I cannot believe that nobody has dethroned doors in all of the years.
Yeah,
And then maybe that's something that Shawn and I do here. We're just gonna use. We might just do some vibe coding. Have you heard
yeah,
of vibe coding, Shawn?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we might just do some vibe coding and just like build our own stuff.
The the yeah, the problem with doors, well, so no, I can't say there's so many problems with doors. It's not it's not doors itself. It's the requirement of having requirements is it makes you have a doors. And there's been a number of good counterparts to doors. I think Requisite Pro was a very good one. But IBM bought them, and IBM then bought doors, and so doors won.
And I think those are going to be great discussions too, right? Because in my life, there's always been like a dichotomy between doors and software delivery based off of like waterfall,
Uh-huh.
and then requirements and agile. And there's like this conflict of how do you do a waterfall doors traditional upfront requirements in an agile world where it's like you just need enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, it depends on your definition of agile. And, and,
So
and
we're
there's
gonna
a
have
lot.
great debates.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate on that, and most people are going to say I'm wrong. But you can take any aspect of the software development lifecycle and apply agile to it. You don't have to apply agile from one, side all the way to the other, or from one end to the other. You should, but you don't have to. You can have the vast majority of requirements locked in and then start doing agile software development. But the key part of agile is being able to change your requirements as they need to. But it's very possible a project doesn't need to change their requirements during the software development. So
Yeah, and then one of the big plugins that exists like in the Jira world is like R4J requirements for Jira,
mhm.
and it just blows my mind that I don't know software started being a thing in the 60s, 70s,
Yeah, you're right.
and we're still doing requirements the same way.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Like I can't imagine like how do we not have better tools or better methods to do requirements, and I think again case studies I think is going to be a big key of this where we evaluate, discuss, debate what's what.
So a real quick story. I was at a conference somewhere, and I needed an icebreaker to start talking about requirements management and doors, and um, so I asked the room what they were using for requirements, and we were talking about software version control before that, and so this was kind of like a segue that I was using, and it failed miserably because this I think it was like around 2005. And I had learned about Jira roughly a year earlier. Didn't really get my hands too deep into Jira yet, and I asked the audience, so what's everyone using for requirements management? And I was expecting majority of the room to say doors, and only one woman spoke up. Everyone apparently was ignoring me, and this is not a lot of people had smartphones at the time.
They're going to fact check you on the spot.
Yeah. This one woman goes, Jira. I'm like, well, Jira is a great tool for, issue management, but it's not necessarily a requirements tool. And I still believe I was right in 2005. I'm not right now. It's definitely changed a lot, and it can be used for requirements. But yeah, she
It can
was.
definitely be used for requirements, but it doesn't follow the traditional model. which is
No, it
why,
doesn't at all.
which is why again, I think there's a healthy debate to have where, depending on the framework or methodology you want to leverage,
Mhm.
there's pros and cons to a lot of stuff. And DevOps is this troubling thing where you want requirements with DevOps. Like DevOps doesn't eliminate requirements.
True. And so that brings up a good point. A lot of people will use these terms like DevOps or Agile to try to get rid of something they don't like. So, hey, I'm Agile, so I don't have to follow any of these processes that
Yeah,
we used to do in the past.
I think a lot of people confuse agile with agility, which are
Yes.
not the same things.
Yeah.
At one of my old contractors, we used to say better, faster, cheaper, but you can't have you can have two,
Yeah.
but not all three.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to pick: is it better, is it faster, or is it cheaper? You're not getting all three.
You can't get all three. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think again, there's so much to discuss, and we really want to break down into that the DevOps, that infinite life cycle, because even within the Atlassian ecosystem, Atlassian tries to hit the entire gamut of the DevOps infinite loop
Yes.
with their own in-house product. So expect some influence from Atlassian, because again, we're just so involved in the Atlassian community, but we definitely want to explore what GitHub's doing, what GitLab's doing, what
Yeah.
other vendors are promoting, and
JFrog, Sonatype,
yeah.
those companies as well.
I
Yeah.
still remember JFrog when Artifactory came out, right?
Uh-huh.
That's theirs, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought Artifactory was
That's
like the
their.
coolest name ever.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we still do that. I plan. In fact, I was just looking at the registration for their conference earlier today. Um,
Yeah. And then who makes there's that video, there's a code editor. Oh boy, JetBrains.
oh, that is the company, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the company. Yeah, but like I said, this is what excites me about this whole DevOps stuff. Like we can go deep in a lot of different topics
Mhm.
and talk IDEs. We can talk Maven stuff,
Yeah.
right?
And then we can pull in other experts as well as we go.
That's something we haven't even considered, even talked about, right? Like I'm sure as we grow popularity here, folks are going to want to come on and chat. Partners and vendors can come in and say, what are you working on?
Yeah.
What's the latest and greatest happening in the GitLab world or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of exciting stuff. So if you're 15 minutes into this and you haven't hit that subscribe button, and we haven't convinced you enough to why we're excited for you to hit the subscribe button, then take a second here to smash the subscribe button, hit that like button while you're down there, and make sure you're sharing. Well, after I get scolded for not mentioning my sponsors. When you're in the heat of the moment of doing the live stream and you're trying to carry the conversation, right?
Yeah.
You're trying not to allow for dull moments, or trying not to allow for moments of silence.
Yeah.
And you got to keep the narrative in your mind straight, because I don't script anything, right? And so when you're doing all this thinking and all this processing and trying to think of I'm trying to hear what you're saying, but at the same time I'm like, what's the next thing I'm going to ask you?
Plan out. Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I'm worrying about is who the heck sponsors the damn episode.
All right. Well, so I do care if any potential sponsors are listening. But
no, we definitely care. Don't get me wrong. We definitely care. We just need to find a way to automate it.
Automate everything. Yeah.
Yeah. To remember who your sponsor is or stuff like that. It gets challenging when you're in the
and we will be playing with the different AI tools for editing and all that. So hopefully, when I flub up words, which I constantly will mispronounce things, we'll try to fix that and edit. That's one of the reasons we're not doing this live.
Yeah. So anyways, folks, thank you again very much. Shawn, it was a pleasure for this very first episode. And you thought we were barely going to have 20 minutes of discussion.
I was worried about that. Yeah. I'm glad we got almost 50 minutes so far. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you all again. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you share this video with everybody you got. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you feedback, style that you want this podcast to go in, again, that comment section down below is available. And let us know. We're a growing podcast, so you can bet that we're going to be reading every comment. And so make sure you let your voice be heard. And Shawn and I will be watching those comments. Anything you want to close out with, Shawn?
Well, I believe we'll probably have some of our contact information in the channel information.
Yes, because you have a company on DevOps too, right? So
Yes.
if anybody needs any help with DevOps,
and we might go into a little bit more formal introductions later
yeah.
in other episodes, but I think we can wrap it up now. But
All right. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like and drop any questions in the comments. Thank you all.
all right. Bye, everyone.